Learn to say no without guilt. You can't please everybody. You can't do everything for everybody. Hi everyone, welcome to my channel. If you are new to my channel, I am so happy that you are here. Welcome. Thanks for tuning in. And if you're a returning subscriber, thanks for tuning in once again. So this video is all about setting healthy boundaries within your home, how to maintain healthy boundaries within your home, what kind of boundaries you need to set within your home, and how to deal with boundary pushbacks. My name is Olufumi Odumuagun and I'm a homemaking enthusiast, and I share different types of homemaking content that can change the trajectory of your home for good. So setting healthy boundaries is very essential in order to have a functioning and healthy home and family. And boundary setting is not a bad thing. In fact, it is very important to learn how to set healthy boundaries for yourself. So what is boundary setting? So boundary setting is establishing clear expectations on different matters or different aspects of life and communicating them effectively in order to reduce stress and to ensure that everyone in the family feels valued and respected. So what are the importance of setting boundaries? Setting boundaries helps to prevent resentment, helps to reduce stress, helps to ensure that everyone is respected and valued in a home. And setting boundaries, like I mentioned, is very important. So what are the types of boundaries you need to set in your home? The first I will say is emotional boundaries. For you to have a functional family, you need to set boundaries that ensure emotional intelligence within your home. For example, you want to set boundaries like no yelling between you and your spouse, no arguments when the kids are around or when there are external parties around. You want to set boundaries around how you communicate with your spouse and children, no yelling, no shouting on them, no snapping at each other, no hurtful criticisms. We don't shut each other up. We let everybody speak and communicate openly. It's important to set these boundaries. These boundaries are key elements in emotional intelligence. You can watch my video on emotional intelligence. It's very important to set boundaries that ensure that everybody is in the right emotional space. Another emotional boundary that you need to set is to understand how to give space to other people. Sometimes people don't want to talk. Sometimes people need time to retreat for prayers or for meditation. It's important to understand that people have these emotional needs and accord them the space to have personal time for themselves. The second type of boundary you want to set in your home are the etiquette boundaries. For example, you need to teach your children to knock on the door before entering anyone's room that is not theirs. Teach them to take permissions. Teach them to not just make demands disrespectfully. Another type of etiquette boundaries is setting boundaries around family time. For example, I would say set boundaries like no phones during family time, no phones on the dining table. Set boundaries that allow your family to bond. These are basic etiquettes anyway. It helps your family to bond with each other. Set boundaries around phone calls. What do you do when other people are making phone calls? What do you do when you need to speak with someone who is on the phone? Do you just interrupt or barge in or make signals? Learn to set boundaries, especially with your kids in these cases, so that they know what to do or what is expected of them in different scenarios and situations. Also, you need to set screen time boundaries for kids if you have kids, and even for yourself. It's not enough to just say things like, oh, you watch TV too much. What does too much mean? Set boundaries for your children based on their age. There are different recommendations of screen time allowance for kids of different age. You want to check it out and set boundaries for your children so you know the one that has 2 hours screen time or less, depending on their age, and communicate it clearly to these kids and have them follow through with it. The third type of boundary I would say is spiritual boundaries. Make sure that you set boundaries that allow you to create time for family devotion and Bible study and family prayers. Not setting boundaries might allow you to not do these activities even though you want to do them. I remember growing up, we don't eat until we have done our morning devotion. So you want to set boundaries. You might not follow this particular boundary, but you want to set boundaries that allow that these things are done at the intervals that you set them to be done. Also, you may need to set boundaries around how people behave and their mannerisms during family devotions and during spiritual activities. Do you allow your children to roam around or play, or do you press phone during prayers and all those kind of things? So set those boundaries and be clear on them. For example, I would say it's not good enough that you are pressing phone or scrolling through social media while doing family devotion. So you want to set those boundaries for yourself and for your children and for your spouse and everyone in your home. Also, under spiritual boundaries, you want to set boundaries around going to church or your place of worship or mosque or whatever religion you might be practicing. Create boundaries that ensure that everybody takes part in all of these activities. For example, you might set boundaries like nobody stays back at home during church hours, nobody is allowed to lag behind or wake up late on days that we are going to church, etc. Set boundaries that allow everybody in the home to be spiritually conscious. The fourth type of boundary you want to set in your home is relationship boundaries. This might look surprising, but you need to tell your spouse what you expect of them, and even your children what you expect of them. Some men or women think that it's okay to flirt or to have female friends or to have open relationships. There are a whole lot of things that are unhealthy that go on in the world right now. So it's important that you have proper communications with your spouse on what you expect in a proper relationship. For example, flirting, you want to tell your spouse you don't like them to have two close female friends, or you want them to set certain boundaries between the opposite sex and all those kind of things. Communicate clearly what your expectations are in a relationship so that you won't be married and your spouse will think that it's okay for them to do certain things. Some cultures or some people think that it's okay for men to cheat. For example, some people think it's okay to have open relationships where I can have other relationships and you can have other relationships as long as we keep our family. Make sure that you communicate your boundaries clearly. If you don't want any of those things, please say it clearly. No cheating, no flirting, and tell your spouse your limits. Also, create boundaries that ensure that you have marital activities. If you are in a marriage, for example, you want to create boundaries that ensure that you have sex with your spouse and romance and all those things. Because if you don't set boundaries, you might just find out that you're going a long time without these essential activities. The fifth type of boundary you need to set, I would say, is very important, and is boundaries with extended families and relatives, in-laws, and even friends sometimes. Set clear expectations on visitations or who comes to live in your home. Sometimes some homes break just because they have people coming to live in with them that they never wanted to live with or they never expected. So let your spouse know who can come in to live with you. And this also applies to children. Sometimes children just bring friends in with their loads. If you don't have clear boundaries, you will just find out that you take in everybody and anybody into your home. And this might not be unhealthy, even though it looks like you are being kind and hospitable. You want to set boundaries around who comes into your home. Many children have been abused and treated negatively just because of the people that were accommodated in the home and in the family. Also, when you have people living in or visiting or staying for a period of time, you want to set expectations on how they behave, the level of influence they have in the house, what decisions they can make, because we find out that sometimes in-laws come into the family and enforce their own decisions over the decision of the people who live in the house and expect that their own decisions are more important, even though they are third parties in that family. Also, it's important to set clear expectations on the influence that third parties hold on the family. Whose advice do we take? Whose advice do we not take so seriously? and all those kind of things. Who do we listen to? Who are our mentors? It's important that you set boundaries around those kind of issues. Now I'll go to how to maintain healthy boundaries within your home. The first point I would say is communicate clearly. That's the bedrock or the basis of setting boundaries and maintaining them. Tell all the people involved your expectations. If it's your kids, your spouse, let them know what you expect of them and have them give you feedback on how they have heard you and how they intend to maintain these boundaries. Also, it's important that you are kind and gentle in your explanations or in your expectations. Don't just talk anyhow. You can talk firmly but in a very kind manner. And also, you can hold family meetings regularly to ensure that expectations and boundaries are continuously expressed, because sometimes boundaries change, expectations change. So make sure that you are communicating properly with everyone in your home. The second ways to ensure that boundaries are maintained is be consistent with your rules and your expectations. You don't just change your expectations. Today you have one expectation, tomorrow you shift ground. If you are inconsistent, people will easily shift limits. For example, if you want your children to watch TV for a particular number of hours, or you want them to go to bed at a particular time, don't keep shifting ground anyhow, because once you do that, boundaries will definitely get pushed. The third way is to lead by example. So you don't want to set boundaries and you yourself, you do the opposite of what you are asking people to do. For example, if you are saying no yelling, but you are the master yeller in the house, then that boundary will be very difficult to maintain. The fourth tip is to use gentle but firm reminders. Sometimes children, spouses forget those boundaries that you've set because maybe it's not first nature to them. You want to gently remind them from time to time. I told you earlier that I do not like this thing. Please kindly don't do this anymore. Make sure that you remind them of your boundaries in a firm but in a very gentle manner. The fifth way to maintain boundaries is learn to say no without guilt. You can't please everybody. You can't do everything for everybody. If people are asking you or making unnecessary demands, learn to say no without guilt. If you need to rest, if you need to sleep, say no to parties, say no to what you cannot accommodate at that particular time. Also, if things do not align with your values, learn to say no. For example, your spouse or your children are asking you to do things that do not align with the will of God or values that you have set for yourself. Kindly communicate your values once again and learn to stand your ground and say no for things that are inappropriate. The sixth way to ensure that boundaries are maintained and followed is to be open to re-evaluation of boundaries and adjustments. Sometimes some boundaries that you have set just do not work. You want to re-evaluate why it's not working and what you can adjust and how to make sure that these boundaries are established and followed. Another thing is sometimes children change, your spouse change, seasons change. You want to evaluate boundaries that you've set in the past and see how you can adjust. For example, there are rules around screen time for children less than 18 months and your child has grown past that age. You want to check again if you need to increase their screen time or decrease it depending on circumstances and your goals. The last part that I'll be speaking about is how to deal with boundary pushback. The first way is to stay firm and don't feel guilty. Many times people make us feel guilty about boundaries that we've set. People want you to do things that are not beneficial to you just for their own selfish reasons, and then they make you feel guilty about those things. Stay firm on your boundaries as long as you have evaluated them properly and it's the right thing for you to do. Stay firm on your boundaries and don't feel guilty. Remember that boundaries are on the long run for the good of everyone. So even the person that you're setting boundaries for or against, most times will eventually benefit from these boundaries. So make sure that you stay firm and consistent with your boundaries without feeling guilty. The second way to deal with boundary pushbacks is to remain calm and avoid arguments. Ensure that you are enforcing your rules without emotional outbursts like anger. For example, your children need to go to bed. Ensure that they go to bed at the time that you have communicated and set with them. Set clear expectations and be firm with it. and be calm when it's time to be firm with it. Have them do that thing without shouting or yelling. Just be very firm and ensure that they do the right thing. The third thing is to use consequences when necessary. For almost every boundary you set, you might need to think about consequences. What do I do when this person wants to push my boundaries? So it's important that you set consequences and communicate it clearly with whoever it is. For example, if someone is yelling at you after you've told them no yelling, you might tell them, oh, I'm sorry, I might have to leave this conversation right now. Make sure that you give consequences when necessary. And when you set your consequences, stand by them. So if you tell someone that I am going to leave this conversation, if they keep yelling, make sure that you walk away from that conversation. And if it's for your kids, think about appropriate consequences that is age appropriate and set it for them and stand by it when they push back. The fourth and most important way to deal with pushbacks is to pray for wisdom and guidance when dealing with people. You want to ask God for wisdom on how to deal with people who are pushing back against you, because with God's wisdom you will know how to deal with peculiar situations and everybody will have peace on the long run. So I hope that in this video you have learned that boundaries are not bad and they are actually very important to maintain a healthy home. And I hope that you begin to set boundaries now and communicate them clearly with people that are necessary. Thank you so much for watching this video. Please kindly like the video and subscribe to my channel. This will allow the videos to be recommended to other people who might need them. And have an amazing time. Bye.